This is David. I'm joining by video today. Is that any better?
Please join me in the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just real quickly, I think I made a mistake last meeting in not welcoming you officially.
Oh,
Commissioner Herman, I
Thank you.
apologize for that.
That's okay.
Welcome. And you also notice another new face up here, Trina Kingsbury, new commissioner, so welcome. All right, Planning Commission minutes dated February 11th. On page 2, right under public hearing agenda, paragraph D. Paragraph starting with Jenny and show. There's a couple sentences in there that are either missing words or she said the applicant is variances for a reduced lot size. Maybe applying is missing or something. And then 2 sentences down, she noted that did not identify any special unique circumstances.
The applicant, maybe?
Just read weird to me. It was missing they or something. She noted that they did not identify.
We'll make those.
Okay, anybody else's? I'd like to make a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes as amended. Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Did she still vote since she?
If she read them,
Sure. Or did you read the minutes? Okay. Okay. So Commissioner Kingsbury? Aye. How do you think? Commissioner Herman?
Aye.
Commissioner Cisco? Aye.
Aye. All right.
Yes, sir. And
David's
David's on Zoom? Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, Commissioner Rosengard. Right. All right. We now have topics from the floor. This is it for anything not on the public hearing agenda, and it's limited to 5 minutes per topic. Do you have anyone? Anybody online? Seeing none. Are we okay to start 2 minutes early on the hearing?
Should probably just,
Or we can talk about the joint meeting.
Yeah. we can move down.
yeah, let's talk about the joint meeting.
Move down and discuss the joint meeting and come back to the first hearing.
Yeah, this is quick. So there was consideration from the mayor about the September date. And so Mayor Massey can't be present for that one. And so there was a discussion of whether or not we should move it. And I think 24th is kind of the one that would be a potential. I just want to have a discussion with the group The council is composed of 5 people, the commission's composed of 7 people, and then we have 2 to 4 staff. That's an average of 15 people. 1 out of 15 is 7%. There's a lot of people, a lot of different schedules. Should we change schedules based on that or not? And this is a discussion that we would have tomorrow with the joint meeting too. So I figured we could have a primer today. And if you have no opinion, that's fine too.
I think because it's the mayor, it would be nice if she was able to attend, so I'd be open to changing it.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
No objection or anything.
So no objection.
So objection.
Okay, cool. Easy. And 35.
Perfect timing. All right, it is now 6:35 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a remand of appeals for a conditional use permit and 4 variances. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 09200 on map 5N1W-34CC. The applicant is Dan Hatfield. The owner is LeGrand Townhomes LLC. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
I have to step out. Dan's actually building a house for me, so. Stand up.
For this matter, would you like to sit in the back?
I can, sure. Yeah.
Anybody else? Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte communication or site visit?
I have driven by there just on my way home. And that's it. So,
All right.
when we- up there.
Does anyone in the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberation and discussion. Following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. SHMC 17.100.040 and 17.108.050. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described. Other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed condition of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff?
Deja vu. That's what we're dealing with on this one. So the commission denied this matter in December. The applicant appealed it to the council and then the council remanded it. And this doesn't happen that often. I should remind you of the circumstances just to help you out. So this lot here, the one outlined in blue there at the corner of Wyatt and Fifth Street, There was a triplex that was built there many decades ago before we had the rules that we have now. The lot is too small for a triplex based on our current rules. That is what we call a non-conforming use. And jurisdictions have non-conforming use rules. And typically they say if a non-conforming use is destroyed to a certain extent, then that use is kaput. It can't be reestablished. And that's what happened in this case. It burned and then was left there in decay for a long time. So the applicant, being very determined to get a triplex back, applied for a series of variances. Successful so far. Now, in both the commission as well as the council, there wasn't a lot of openness to the triplex concept. So we're kind of at a point where generally the commission and the council are on the same page as far as not really being cool with the density variance to allow that third unit. And then one of the variances had to do with architectural articulation that applies to multifamily development. Multifamily development's three or more dwelling units on a property. That would be a moot case if we stick with the duplex. I'm gonna assume that's where we're at. Now, if based on your rethinking of this, the testimony you received today, you're like, well, God, we really could go back to those other variances, we can have that discussion. But based on the discussion that we've had, both the commission and council have been kind of frowny face on the triplex issue. So why the remand? What's going on? Why the deja vu? Well, so in the code, it says when there's new information that wouldn't have necessarily been readily available to the original decision maker, that the council can kick it back to consider that new information. And what that new information is in this case, so before, we were talking about the setback variance. So there's two that we're considering now, the setback or reduced yard along Wyeth, which would normally be, I think, 10 feet. And the request is to be really close to that. And then the other one is the off-street parking variance. So in December, so if you recall, of course, not all you recall because you weren't here. If you recall, we kind of discussed, well, are you receptive to that setback variance? And some of the concerns of the commission was you didn't know what set of plans that would apply to. And so it was hard for you to provide any basis for that, which was completely made sense. So after the meeting, I talked to Dan about it and said, well, look, Dan, if you could get away with the duplex and some of the variances, would you use the same plans, but only for a duplex? And so, he was receptive to that. And that's what we talked with the council about. We mentioned, I just discussed the conversation we had with the planning commission in December, and they're like, well, maybe the commission would reconsider at least the setback variance and maybe the parking variance. So that's why we're here. That's the foundation of this deja vu moment. Now, in a variance, we have to find several things. There's unique circumstances, there's special circumstances associated with the site. It's the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship, things of that nature. So let's talk about the two variances that are kind of on the table with this as a duplex. There's a couple things to consider. One we kind of talked about before. If you look at the photo on the top, so this is after the burned out building was demolished. However, a wall was retained along Wyeth, and you can kind of see some of the topography that's happening there. But one thing we didn't talk about in December was, well, what's happening in the neighborhood? And so the photo below that one, the aerial photo kind of helps show that. And if you look closely, I know it's kind of small up there. Luckily, you can see the foundation here. Pretty close to, if not right on the property line. But then if we look at the adjacent block, the church is pretty close. This house next door is pretty close. And then even these ones are pretty close here too. So there is kind of a pattern where the normal airline space that we would have along there is abnormal. The abnormality is what's normal because of these other buildings that are closer to the property line. So that's potential something that you can hang your hat on to grant the reduced yard variance along Wyeth Street. So now as for parking, Dan would like, I guess I should have stayed up there. I mean, my exercise anyways. So Dan's hope is to continue the historic use of the oversized shoulder as on-street parking. Now, as a duplex only needs 2 parking spaces. That's the most we can require per state law. And that could be a paved pad as little as 18 feet long and 16 feet wide, as long as you have 1 foot of clearance on either side. And the intuitive place to put that would be off of 5th Street here, somewhere in there. You would have to have a paved driveway that got to that pad, but probably not a huge burden, at least compared to all the other development that we see. And I think one way to look at that is people, regardless if there's parking here or not, human nature, some people are gonna park on the shoulder. And so I think it's a matter of, you know, do they have this option too, or just this option? And so that's one thing for you to think about based on the testimony and everything tonight. So for all, excuse me, for all practical purposes, that's where we're at.
Please remember that we can ask questions at this time, but cannot deliberate until after the public hearing is closed. That said, does the commission have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I guess the only one I have is this a remand or is this a submission of a new plan?
This is a remand. So this is the same.
It's gonna be changing the plan. Right?
Yeah, well, it's the same, so it's the same building plan, but he would modify it. Well, let me talk about, that didn't make sense. So the recommended conditions, if you approved what we're talking about today, the second one, the approved variances shall apply to the plans presented and not other plans, except the plans may be modified for the use as a duplex as long as the building footprint does not change. So it's using the same plans, but modifying them a little bit, probably mostly internally, to have 2 dwelling units instead of 3. And so that's kind of recycling what's already in the record to obtain something out of this process.
I mean, it didn't matter to me. It was just more of, I just didn't understand how it was a remand when they're submitting kind of a new plan.
Yeah, and it's an important question, so I'm glad you brought it up, just in case anybody else was like, I don't know what's going on here.
With the off or on-street parking, I'm curious, does that mean if you gave them on-street parking, that's reserved for them? Or is it still anybody can park there?
It would be public street parking, and so, yeah, it would be Florida applies. But basically, you'd be saying that shoulder is sufficient for that use. So that's a good question, though. Whereas the off-street parking spaces within the boundary of the subject property, you know, would officially belong to the tenants. So yeah, good question.
So basically the footprint of the duplex would be identical to the triplex, just changing things inside, just to be clear. So
Yeah, 2 units instead of 3.
There still be 3 accesses in front, so just see 3 doors. Depends.
Good question.
the applicant.
So, this is a public hearing, we'd have testimony just like normal, go through all that.
Yeah.
And stuff.
I think the, looking at this hard hearing.
So the applicant have a presentation?
I can't hear.
Would you like to step up to the desk and?
Yes. Well, like it's a secret. I can't hear.
Do you want to sit just up here, Dan, so you can
I
hear?
think I will.
Yeah, okay, just, yeah,
You're close.
stay closer, that's fine.
I didn't hear what you said.
So do you have a presentation or something you'd like to tell us, testimony you'd like to give us?
I've said everything. I mean, I've been here 2 times. This is my 3rd time. I mean, Jacob Tumnade, he asked me if I use the same blueprint for the foundation. I said, yes, I could do that. So I would make a duplex out of it. But if you go down, I repeat myself, you go down 5th and 6th, everything's parked out in front anyway. It ain't like I'm asking for something that nobody does. And I understand that people across the street are bitching, but you go down on 15th down there, the duplex there, you see a car there sitting there with no wheels on it. That's what I would think would be a junkyard that they would worry about, not somebody parking there living. Is why do they want something that, and even the one that lives across the street, if you go there, you can see the car sitting out in front. It ain't, I'm not asking for anything that the rest of St. Helens not doing. So, and as far as the setback, like he said, if you go look at the house next to it, it's right in line with me. I don't know what the setbacks were back there when they built those or not, but the retaining wall that I want to use is right in line with the other house. I'm not trying to put it out in front of it or anything. What I was told, and maybe I'm wrong, but is whatever house is there, you can go alongside of that. And as long as you ain't coming out farther than that, you can do the same setback. That's all I'm asking for. Use the same setback that my neighbor's doing. Well,
You don't have to say anymore, but you will have a chance to rebut if there's other testimony.
okay, that's fine.
And do you want to sit like here so you can hear?
Yeah. I'll bring it up here. I don't know why I can't hear you.
Did you hear me talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hear you anywhere. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any testimony in support of the application? None. Any neutral testimony, those who are not in favor or against the proposal?
I have a quick question. So are we talking about a duplex or a triplex at this point?
We're talking about a duplex at this point.
Okay.
And then seeing none, request for testimony in opposition to the application.
Thanks for having me. So we're still talking,
Name, please.
Ken Bowen. I live across the street. I lived there on 4th and Wyatt. Lived there for about 32 years. I've seen a lot of stuff come and go. I've seen that duplex be there before and the problems that it created. But so we're still talking about the variance in the front. That's what I'm totally against. I've been down here twice now, and that's what I'm against is parking in the front. It's a lot of congestion up there, right there on the corner. There is a fire hydrant there. But we created these laws in the past to try to fix this problem. I don't have a problem with something built on the property, on your own property, if that's feasible, if you can have parking on the property for your own vehicles. That doesn't bother, but having parking clear out on the street, there's not even that, you couldn't even park a full-size truck in there without it hanging off the road. All my property out there, sure, I could park on the road, but I have 3 cars and I have a trailer. All this stuff's parked on my property. The neighbor beside me, right across from that, does the same thing. All his stuff's parked on the property. There's gonna be, if there's a triplex there, I mean, let's say I got 3 cars, how many cars is that gonna create? It's gonna create a lot of cars. They're gonna be parked out there. People use that corner a lot. They go around the liquor store and they just circle and they circle and they circle. It's gonna be a blind corner. I just am very much against it. If he can build it and keep all the cars on his property, that's fine. Visitors come, they can park on the street. But I've had before cars parked in front of my house. It was a small little place, so it probably, some of them only had 1 person there. So it was a 1-car family. But we came up with these new rules. I know people rebuild homes, remodel them, and that doesn't acquire a form like new buildings to have everything parked on your property, but it's a mess down there. People park in the bike lanes. I have 7 grandkids. I can't even walk them down the sidewalk because people are across the sidewalk. They're right up next to it. They don't have enough room to park. So now they're halfway on the sidewalk and you can't even get through there. So that is, if he can build something, keep everything on his own property, he could do what he wanted to do. It's all for gain for the builder. It's all about financial gain. That's all it is. He doesn't live here in town. He's not going to see it. We're the ones that live on the street is going to have to deal with it. And then the house across the street also, he's going to have issues. He's got 2 full-size trucks that he parks it in his driveway. It's going to be hard for him to back out. He's really going to have to be careful. But I would like to see the law stay intact. I mean, he can do what it wants on the property, but have all your own parking on there. So we don't have the problem of people dodging in and out of cars, and there's not a whole lot of room there. I think I got everything on my list, so that was pretty good.
Great. Thank you for your.
Thank you.
For clarification, it's a duplex.
Oh,
No triplex.
what's that?
It's a duplex now instead of a triplex.
Well, I understand that, but I'm still concerned about the parking out there. There's going to be a lot of cars out there. And then the way it's been left now, finally it did get tore down, which was nice, but it was a struggle dealing with that. But the way it sits now is there's about a 20-foot drop right next to the sidewalk. There's no barricade. There's no fencing around it. There's kids that walk through there all the time. I'm concerned about that. In the meantime, something needs to be done with that. I'm not sure if that's the right place to bring it up, but that's my comment. Thank you.
I just said, as you said, triplex. That's why I just.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So,
But my biggest concern is that parking out front.
So just for clarification, again, the variances that he's asking for are the same variances that he asked for before, except for the being a duplex instead of a triplex, right?
Yeah, so a couple of the variances are, unless you decide otherwise. We're dealing with the variances that could apply to the duplex, which would include off-street parking and the reduced setback along Wyeth.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, you
Yes,
can.
Oh, okay,
So-
I thought, that's what I
Let's
did.
finish the test.
Yes, sir.
Just hold on just a second, please. Is there any other testimony in opposition of the application? Okay, now you're allowed to rebut.
On the parking, if I can park sideways and get 2 of them that way, I don't have to park them out towards the street. So if it only takes 2 parking, I got 100 feet there. I could put 2 parking spots there easy without pulling straight in.
When you're saying that, okay, if I ask a question? You're saying what you were just saying, Mr. Hatfield, you're talking about what, Jacob, that's your name. What Jacob said earlier about some kind of a pad.
Yeah, be a pad out in front.
Okay.
No, it's-
But is I can put 2 parking spots there. I mean, the car's only 19 feet long, so you got 100 feet there. Have no problem parking sideways there.
Yeah, let me illustrate just with my hand.
suggesting parallel.
What I'm talking about. So if he, oh, no, perfect. This is rectangular. So if you said, well, we're not really comfortable granting the off-street parking variance, then his 2 spaces would come off Fifth and you'd have, and it's not to scale, those are 2 pretty huge parking spaces.
Right.
But you would have a, little rectangular pad like that connected with the driveway to the paved portion of the street.
But the problem with that is I'm 8 foot down. You're gonna have to go down. You know what I'm saying? The parking up in top, I want really, since I'm gonna go to duplex, I want to put 2 handicap units there. If I can park up top, then I can have a ramp right going into the duplexes. That's my idea of why I want them up on top. If you put them down and low, then it's not really a handicap anymore because you gotta put stairs up there to get up there. That makes sense.
Your rebuttal.
So I'm just saying, if I park sideways, he has no problem with walking down the street or doing anything, because I'm sideways, I'm not parked toward the sidewalk and my ass ain't now in the middle of the street. So that solved both our problems. If only have 2 parking spots. That's all I have to say.
Does the commission have any final questions?
But the pad and the driveway on the side, set, further back at the back end of the property on Fifth Street, would that not accommodate? You wouldn't have that big of a drop there?
If I park out in front of that duplex or park on Fifth, I still have the same problem. If I go down into the property, I'm down there 8 feet. If I put it all blacktop, where's all that rain gonna go? If I build it out in front, I can put my gutters on there, bring the water out in the front and get rid of my water. But if I put a blacktop down in there, where's the water gonna go? I mean, you're changing one evil for the other evil. You know what I'm saying? But if like Jacob said, if I build it down in there, and I can do that. But where's all that water off the blacktop's gonna go? Gonna be just a mud hole down there. I have no idea where that would go.
Anything else to add? You have anything else to add?
No, that's it.
You usually only get one chance. I guess it's up to the chair if you would,
Well, I just had a couple questions.
if you would want them to,
You want to step back up? Yeah, I'll allow it.
I think Dan should have another
So-
opportunity to
That'd be fine too,
Okay.
yeah.
So is there variance in between the house on the opposite street, on the other side of it, in between? I don't see where the variances are. I know there's one out front, but there is another one. In between the houses, the one that's on,
Parking is one variance and then.
in between the 2 houses, in between where Ferry lives. Is there a variance on that side?
No. He's showing 15 feet there and that's adequate. I think it would normally be 10.
I mean, you talk about the parking out front. I mean, he could say that somebody's gonna park out front, but he's not gonna occupy the residence. What do you know how those people are gonna park? Another thing too is, what about the historical wall that's in front of it? Just like the wall, when you come up to Red Apple, there's another wall that runs into that lot. On the sidewalk, on the inside of the sidewalk. There is a wall there. Made out of the basalt rock like some of the other walls that we got here in town. And another thing too, it's odd because I've tried to build a carport and stuff before, but there are no houses really on Wyeth Street. So I don't know where the setbacks are. If they tell me my house, I live across the street on the Fourth Street corner. But I get my mail, I get all my taxes on Wyeth Street. That's where my mailbox is. But when I tried to put a carport in, they said that my house faces Fourth Street. The end of my house. So the setbacks are all different. It changes the setbacks on it. So that's something to think about too. Because I was going to put a carport in and they told me, no, you don't have room because actually your house faces
Maybe.
Fourth Street, which is very strange. And I didn't even know that. I'm like, I didn't understand any of that. And that changed all the setbacks.
Okay.
It goes by your width of your property.
One just point, think of your,
Yeah, something like that. It was very confusing to me.
all right,
On a corner, just so everybody knows, on a corner lot, the front is the narrowest street frontage. So in this case, when you have 100 by 58 lot, clearly 58 is a lesser number than 100, and thus that is the front for the purposes of determining building envelope.
all right. Mr. Hatfield? If you could hear what he was saying, but
I hear
not to rebut any of that, you have the opportunity to do that.
you know, he mostly wants to build a carport, you know, what I got out of it. But mine, if you put it sideways like I suggested, you're gonna have a blacktop there. You're gonna have designated handicap here and handicap here. There's no way they're gonna go there. It depends on how far out you want me to put this blacktop. You just put it where two cars would park there and then right way out of it. I don't see the problem.
Are you is it okay if I ask the question of the applicant? Are you planning on keeping that basalt wall?
You what now?
The basalt wall on Wyeth, do you have plans to keep that?
Yes. I gotta keep it. If I take that out, it's all gonna cave away. That's a retaining wall there. So if I do anything with that wall, it's gonna mess up the whole thing.
I'd rather you leave it. There's some of those walls around town were built by the WPA here.
I
So,
would like to leave it too.
thank you. All right,
A question about,
Okay.
if we have disability, is there any way of designating the property as a disabled housing? Where you can actually have designated parking for disabled parking?
is that more for deliberation though?
Only place to park on the property is down in the hole.
I'm just saying with the I don't know if it's deliberation.
It seems like it might be.
If you look at the foundation there, you can see how far down. And the other, it's on the corner. So whatever this wall is here, this wall goes down the same amount.
I'm looking at something different right now than.
Okay, I don't quite understand what you're looking
And,
at.
and it's okay, you're gathering facts. So it's still not, you're just trying to understand all the stuff. So there is building code provisions about accessibility, which I'm not terribly familiar with, but I know that accessible parking spaces don't start kicking in until you have so many units. And I know triplex is too small for those to apply. So the classic wheelchair emblem, sidewalk, access aisle, that stuff wouldn't apply until there were more units involved. So he wouldn't be obligated to put in those designated parking spaces. Is what
Trying to work around.
Does that answer your question?
All right, anybody else have any questions? Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion.
I have so many things happening in my brain right now. So the variance as far as everything lining up on the street, that doesn't bother me so much because that's how the street is. The parking is where I'm really struggling. Because just because others park there, you know, in the right of way, they're not, we haven't designated those as parking spaces. So to me, that feels like, you know, if Dan gets it, then, you know, why can't everybody have it? And then I have questions, not questions, I guess I have concerns that this isn't really a designated ADA building because there are 2 stories and the living is on one level and the bedrooms are on another level
Good point.
and so. I mean, are people gonna park there? Probably. Does that mean we have to say it's okay? I don't think so.
Well, you can see in the photograph, the structure on the fourth corner of Wyeth and Fourth. There's the.
So there
Yeah, which I don't disagree with, but we didn't say that was okay. That's where I'm, you know what I mean?
Because there was testimony to it, I see it in the picture, does the fire hydrant, what does that do for parking? Fire hydrant on the corner?
Good question. I know there's distance rules, which I haven't had to think about in a long time, so they're not right in my
10 feet.
memory.
I think it's 10 feet.
Maybe. But I think, you know, one thing to think about is, you know, our job is public health, safety and welfare, and that fire hydrant is an important component to maintain that goal.
10 feet. Parking,
Okay.
10 feet of a fire hydrant.
St. Helens Municipal Code, section 10.04.150, prohibited parking or standing. 10 feet.
Standing.
Hydrants.
And then just to discuss the sidewalk. Location of the sidewalk would be the same, he'd have to pour a new sidewalk with.
Yeah, that's one of the recommended conditions. Wyeth Street be improved with a rebuilt sidewalk and pavement of the area between sidewalk and street section. I think because it is an old school narrow sidewalk, rebuilding it is potentially something on the table for.
And so looking at the picture of the sidewalk and looking at the old front of the building. Seems like it's hardly any space.
Between the sidewalk and the building?
Sidewalk in the building. What's that number?
And the sidewalk is not on the property line. It's out a little bit. There's
Some discussion about that before. I was hoping to be reminded of that.
And I think I have. Oh, okay, well, per some of my notes, the front of the building to the property line is roughly 4.5 feet. They're old notes, but I think they're still.
Okay.
Accurate. It was surveyed. So there is a survey marker out there. And in one of your older staff reports, there's this photo here where there's this arrow pointing to the survey marker.
Mhm.
Kind of give you an idea of. Yeah, it's not in the current report. It's one of the older ones.
Sidewalk would still be in the same spot.
That's what with the clarification I'm kind of looking for. The Sidewalk is in the same spot then. Scott's out. In the
Was it
same.
rebuilt in the same spot?
Yeah. It would-
I don't
It's supposed
know.
to be wider than the next one.
Yeah, it would be wider, yeah.
12 inches or something, 60 inches.
Yeah, 4 feet is our standard, local street sidewalk, and then if it was a higher classification, which I think Wyeth is, it would be 5,
But it would be in the same position that it is right.
probably. And I say that because I don't know if engineering will be persnickety about exact location.
What I'm thinking is here, we have, if you look at that photograph, we have parking there already, and that's not gonna really change that. Dimensions for that anyway, so it's a something that's already been there.
Yeah, I mean, the sidewalk would need to align with the adjacent one, so I don't see it being significantly offset.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the photograph of the when the structure is still viable. And there's like 4 vehicles there. And so that's that use has been there previously.
Yeah, for me, it's the parking.
Is it parking?
For me, it's the parking. The other variance makes sense. It lines up with the rest of the street.
Right.
I just have a hard time putting a stamp on, okay, it's legal for you to build parking spaces here.
I don't think during Halloween Town, they'd want off-street parking.
Right. I mean, even though I know that people park there and people are parking in
Yep.
the right of way all over town, I understand that, but the difference between they're just doing it and this is special. Designated.
So I guess one thing I was looking at is if, what I understand Mr. Hatfield saying earlier, that if they did push the parking down under, for lack of better words, or in the back part there, as far as it's, there's gonna be doors, entryways into the units on the bottom floor, aren't there?
There would be no units on the bottom floor, there's units on top. It would be just, demo.
They're 2 stories though, correct?
I wouldn't be using downstairs. You can't use downstairs for a handicap unit anymore.
I guess I was just looking at the plans and there's like an upper floor and a lower floor.
I realize that. I'm gonna use the same foundation for the duplex, but I'm not gonna put a triplex there. It's the same distance. Instead of having 3 units, I'm gonna have 2, one on top. There'll be 2 bedrooms on top.
So to understand you, there's foundation or storage on the lower level and the main
I
level.
wouldn't plan on it. And even if I did, handicaps couldn't get up there, because there's gonna be handicap units. I've already, talked to the road and he told me that would be the way to go with the handicaps.
Does this left elevation and this right elevation shows a window?
I understand.
Level?
but I'm using the same foundation. I'm not using 2 floors. I'm only using 1 floor. Just on top.
Okay.
And the lower bit is gonna be, I mean, there's gonna be encased in something,
It's meant
or is it just gonna be pillars
Just feel it.
pillars in the back?
So it'll have a dungeon.
So on the,
Be like 900-foot units instead of the 1,200 each one. I said I'm using the same foundation, but I'm not doing 2 floors.
I get so confused.
Yeah, it's confusing, but
Yeah, with the,
looking at the pictures we're looking at, it's a little confusing, so.
the thing should have come back.
Because the
Because
the elevation also shows storage on the bottom level, that's why I was
Be
asking.
gone.
It'll all be gone.
The whole new plan.
yeah, so.
So Jacob, we're not, this is just informational only, it's nothing base our decision on.
Well, so that's why one of my recommended conditions is, like I said, the approved variances shall apply to the plans presented and not to other plans, except the plans may be modified for the use as a duplex as long as the building footprint does not change. So the idea is that we're using the same shell, but there's gonna be modifications as discussed.
And we have no authority, since he's saying, the applicant's saying that he would make those handicap units to say, we'll give you the parking if you make them handicap units. That's just on his word saying that he's making them handicap units.
I mean. I don't know exactly what that means.
So we should disregard that, or we can choose to disregard that
Yeah, I mean, you're not,
decision.
it's something you could consider and make it a condition. But it's, you feel comfortable doing so.
So he's gonna be allowed to build a duplex there, and somebody living there honestly isn't gonna want to park on the side and walk all the way around to their, so they're gonna park there.
I agree.
Anyway.
I mean, I know they're gonna park there. I guess my hang up is saying that those are designated spots.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I don't think we could.
I don't think we can because it's a public, anybody, that's why I clarified with.
It's like in front of my house on First Street. It's
Where-
first come, first served, and people in the apartment building down the street park right in front of the house all the time.
Is that true? Or if he's proposing that he could do parallel parking instead of angled parking, could he be required to paint parallel parking lines on there so people only use it as parallel parking?
Yeah, that could be designating painted spaces. Sure, that could be part of the improvement required. Because there's already a default condition about improving the shoulder, and so that would just be taking a step further. And those markings, that helps influence human behavior. If there's no markings, people will park. However, if there are, at least theoretically, people that. Sorry.
And if
Should have made it.
if we get parallel parking lines there and people, despite human behavior being responsive to lines, don't parallel park, is that what then code enforceable, or is that just the way it is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. We may have, if that became a parking enforcement question, we'd probably have to dig in the code to see if there's something that says parking contrary to identified markings. Not something I've encountered here, so I don't have the answer right at my.
It seems to me if we painted the lines as or required them to paint the lines as parallel parking, it would discourage people from ignoring the lines and just parking
Well, anybody can
12
park
cars out
here,
there.
could park out here and, with their nose in rather than parallel. I mean, if you're saying that, so that, I mean, people will comply, I believe, with that. With, if it's painted in, that's.
Chair Kingsbury, you have questions or comments? It's the hard one.
This is a hard one.
So I think, there's three things you can consider. One, do you agree that the other variances for the triplex shouldn't apply? because those were part of the request, and I'm assuming so, but
It's duplex. You just said triplex.
Not apply?
but the original application was the triplex, based on all the testimony, you know, we're at the duplex, because it's the remand, all that stuff's still there. I think it would be smart to still motion on those other ones, just to make sure, you know, there's no change there. So that's probably the low hanging fruit. I'm not sensing a change on that. And then maybe try to talk about each variance separately, maybe the setback first, because that might be I'm sensing that maybe one that you're more receptive to.
Yeah, I mean,
That would make sense.
okay.
So could you guide us somebody in the first motion on the other
Yes, so
point?
you would continue to uphold the original denial for the density and the multi-dwelling standards. Yes, and the condition use, yeah, thank you. So denial of this conditional use permit and the density variance, multifamily variance. And that's because that was the original application. We want to make sure we're consistent. When I came in here, I talked about the deliberations of the commission and the council that didn't really seem to support the duplex, but we do want to.
Triplex.
The triplex. Yes, sorry, it's confusing now. So because that's still part of the record of the original application, we want to make sure, you know, we're clear that that stuff's not surviving in your decision.
Yes. Yeah. It's convoluted because we keep going back and forth on some things. And what we're saying is those variances just don't even apply anymore if it's being built as a duplex.
You have to deny them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So the conditional use permit and then those two triplex variances.
So conditional use multifamily and density is what we're looking
Yeah.
at. Okay, so I move to deny the application for conditional use permit, multifamily and density variances.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Commissioner Kingsbury.
Aye for denial. Right.
Your denial. Yeah.
Aye.
I have no idea.
How can we clarify this?
It's just for the triplex.
I
I for the denial.
And David,
Rosen?
Aye.
sorry, Commissioner.
I'm trying to use that commissioner word.
I know.
They're making me stumble.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I didn't hear what was your.
I'm aye, yes. Okay, so now we can just talk about the variance for.
Setback.
Yeah, let's talk about the reduced setback variance.
Setback. And it's,
Under that.
we all seem to be in agreement about being on the same line.
if it's in line with the other properties, I don't see a problem with that.
I don't either.
And would approve it.
Can we make
I,
a motion on that?
sure. I move that we grant variance for the setback as proposed in the plan.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. So, Commissioner Kingsbury?
Aye.
Commissioner Cisco?
Aye.
Or my.
Or am I?
I do.
And
Aye.
aye, all right.
No new categories.
All right, so we're down to parking. I'm correct.
Yes.
Okay. I'm honestly say I'm surprising myself in what my thoughts are in this because I was a hard no on street parking, but thinking of somebody living there, having them walk around the corner.
Maybe they're primary.
And I think we can control the parking problem if we require him to paint parallel lines. But that's the non-voter here.
And so just to help y'all. So for that, the conditions we would recommend there are the three of them that are in the memo. And that's the typical one, that the variance is valid for limited time. It's the variances apply to the plans presented and not other plans, and that really should apply to the setback variance. Except it may be modified as a duplex. And then Wyeth Street shall be improved with rebuilt sidewalk and pavement of the area between the sidewalk and paved section. And then there's two new ones that I've gleaned from the discussion. No impacts to the basalt wall. And that parallel parking spaces be marked.
2 parallel parking spaces.
A minimum at least 2 parallel parking spaces. Maybe they can fit 3. If they can fit more, great, but a minimum of 2. So yeah, that's a good addition.
Worry if we're setting a precedent here, though.
Valid concern.
That's
Are we in?
the case every time we
Are we ready?
consider.
Variance, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I move that we accept the parking variance with the qualifications that we're putting forth,
You could say the conditions as noted by staff.
noted by staff. Conditions as noted by staff.
And those would be the 5 that we've discussed.
Correct.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. How do you vote?
Aye.
I'll say, I hope this kind of mitigates your concerns, so I'm an aye also.
Aye.
Aye.
I mean, are they gonna be handicapped? Are they gonna be enforced for people who park that way? If they're gonna be able to pull in, park 6 cars there? It's just a way of going around wishy-washy. If it's handicap parking,
That wasn't my intention. The intention is when I mark those, I expect them to park the same way that that's been marked.
you expect. I mean, are we gonna force?
Thank you.
Stop here, so. So then, motion for signature.
Motion for signature?
So moved.
Do you have some clarification on what that means?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so, we just like making stuff up because it's fun. No, that's not it.
Again.
So what the normal would be, which turns out to be abnormal based on our habits, but without that, we would bring the findings back to the next meeting. And okay, is everybody cool with this decision? And what we typically do for the sake of timeliness and efficiency for the applicant is have a motion versus the signature. So then the chair can come in before the next meeting, look at the final decision, sign it, and then we get the decision out. So it just saves time.
Had a motion and a second, we did no vote. Aye.
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 David?
Aye.
All right, and hopefully that concludes the deja vu we've experienced on this.
Final written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of the decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments. The appeal deadline will be included in the notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't do that. Whether we grant it or don't grant it, just kind of goes to your point, as you were saying, people are gonna park there.
Oh, yeah. Saw the picture. There are people there.
Pulling straight in too.
And so it helped that there is, room for it. I mean,
House was it was built as a single family home and
If
converted.
I can get on.
Slightly. I did triplex most likely.
We'll just call them.
Okay, to
We
wait
look at
for
YouTube.
Vice Chair and a break real quick.
You can do the script.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is now 7:35 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a legislative land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request to amend the comprehensive plan to include the economic opportunities analysis and related economic goals and policies, and amend the comprehensive plan to include the St. Helens wastewater master plan, St. Helens water master plan, and the St. Helens stormwater master plan. The applicant is the city of St. Helens. As legislative proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? I'd just like to say I was on the committee. Matters?
You have a conflict of interest or bias in this?
I do not.
Okay.
Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of any commissioner to make a fair decision?
You bet.
No.
Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, and deliberations and recommendation. Following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing. The standards for recommendation by the commission shall be based on St. Helens Municipal Code 17.20.120. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable standards as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. All right, staff.
Thank you. Do you have anything to say, or should we just yield our questions?
Yeah.
So we have a consultant who helped us prepare the economic opportunities analysis. And we'll invite her to speak on this. She's prepared a presentation which should cover the basics.
Hello, I'm Beth Goodman. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. So I know some of you have heard me talk about this before. I believe perhaps Commissioner Kingsbury and Commissioner Herman have not. If you're wondering what the heck all of this is and you have questions, I love answering questions. I don't want to keep you here until midnight though. So I will proceed apace, but I'm hoping that you'll stop me for questions. So what we did is the city was granted a grant from the state to develop an economic opportunity analysis, an EOA. And what that is, if you go to the next slide, please, is an analysis that meets certain legal requirements of Oregon's statewide land use planning system for Goal 9, the economy. It's used in your comprehensive plan as a factual basis. So the EOA, if you choose to adopt it, would be adopted into your comprehensive plan. And then say you wanted to make changes to your zoning map, your comprehensive plan map, you would refer back to the EOA and say, do we have enough land to do that? Or other types of changes that require findings related to your comprehensive plan. There's also much more practical reasons to do an EOA. It helps you understand your existing conditions and forecast future conditions to inform an economic development strategy, of which this includes an economic development strategy. It's more of an action plan, really. Your land use policy, so what you've got through your comprehensive plan, and doing coordination, which is a very important part of economic development. This helps you plan for 20 years of growth. As was mentioned, we had a committee, and I think Chair Shoemaker, were you the only person from this group who was on that committee? Because everybody looks familiar now. I think so. Okay. And so as I'm talking about this, you have any input from what you heard from the committee, I certainly welcome you to, I encourage you to speak up. So on the next slide, the facts of this are your economic opportunities analysis report, which is a big, long technical report, which I think everybody has had a chance to review. Some people may find it enthralling. Some people may just snooze their way through it. I can understand. You've also got recommendations for changes to your comprehensive plan policies and actions to implement those changes, and that's in the much shorter memo. And we'll cover some of the highlights of that in a few minutes. So if you go to the next slide, please. We started this back in early 2024. It has to be completed by the end of May as a condition of the grant. So before I go on and talk about some of the findings of the economic opportunities analysis, are there any questions about what it is and how you might use it and why you're doing it? Jacob, if you wanted to tell you more about the history of it, because you have an existing EOA that I can't remember if it was 2007 or 2009 when it was developed.
2009, yeah, that's a good primer. So we adopted our first economic opportunities analysis back in 2009. And we didn't do that because, hey, we want to be a responsible city and cover all these state things. It was in reaction to rezoning what we used to call the veneer property, but is now the Mill subdistrict, basically the expansion of downtown. And so it was zoned heavy industrial because it was a mill forever. And so when we talked to the state, the Department of Conservation and Development, they said, well, if you want to change the color on your zoning map from industrial to something else, you have to check some boxes. And those boxes were, you have to show that you're not shooting yourself in the foot as it pertains to your employment land inventory, your commercial and industrial lands, as opposed to your residential lands. And so we adopted it, and it said we have a whole bunch of industrial land, so a sacrifice of a little bit to be mixed use is okay. And what I didn't like about that era is it was kind of a reaction, and it was done in-house, not with consultants who've done this for a lot. And so it's something that's kind of bugged me ever since. That's a long time to be bugged by something. And so I'm happy to.
So you wrote a grant because you're annoyed.
Yeah, this new one that has been, really productive process with a lot of good citizen input. So that's history in a nutshell.
Okay. There are no other questions. I'll continue on. So on the next slide, we are going to talk about a buildable lands inventory, which is a very strange sort of creature. I say that because it doesn't always necessarily 100% make sense. So your buildable lands inventory for commercial industrial land includes all of the land within the urban growth boundary that is zoned either commercial or industrial. So everything in a color there. What you see that's not in a color there is either residential or some sort of public land, something else. And so on the next slide, as we're looking at all of the land that's in your commercial and industrial zones and plan designations, we're trying to determine if they're vacant or not. And if they're vacant, do they have constraints? So the constraints that we used predominantly were the FEMA regulated floodplain and the floodway, areas with riparian corridors, wetlands and protection zone, of which we worked through a fair bit of work that you'd had done on wetlands and made sure to include as much of that as we could. It also includes areas with slopes of 15% or greater, so steeper areas where it's harder to build, say, industrial, certainly, and areas that are high in landslide susceptibility. So if you go to the next slide. This shows all of your land that is vacant and unconstrained with those constraints on the last piece of on the last map. And so you've got about 302 acres of land all told that are vacant and unconstrained. 280 of that are within your city limits and 22 are in unincorporated areas. Most of that in the city limits is in your heavy industrial, about 81 acres. So on the next slide, we show a table that shows that. Are there any questions about the buildable lands inventory? We had staff review this at least once or twice. We talked to our committee and asked them if they saw any issues on the maps. I don't remember that they did, but if they did, we would have fixed it, certainly. And so that gives you your vacant land where you can do development. Of course, you can do redevelopment on land that's already built and not vacant currently. That happens with some frequency as well. Okay, no questions. We'll go on to employment growth. So some of these things on the next slide, I'm not going to talk through all of these different state and national trends, but let's say we did consider a lot of state and national trends that are affecting all of Oregon, affecting St. Helens. So we thought about those and how those might impact your growth. One of the important trends, of course, shown there is commuting, that you have some number of people who live and work in St. Helens, about 1,113. A lot of people, about 2,700, who commute in for work and live somewhere that's not in the city of St. Helens, and about 5,900 people who commute out for work. Where those people are commuting to, that's all in the EOA report. So on the next slide, one of the more important things that we bring to the discussion is information about the type of employment that you have here. So the blue bars show number of employees in different sectors like government or healthcare. And the little yellow lines, those show the average wages by those sectors. And so when we look at St. Helens average wage, it's about $46,500 compared to Columbia County's of about $51,000. And this is 2022 data, which was the most recent available data when we started this project.
To clarify there, and that does not include self-employed.
This is covered employment. That's the information you can get for cities. We, in our population, our employment forecast in a few moments, we essentially increase that amount to account for people who are not covered by unemployment insurance, so self-employed, that kind of thing. So we account for that as best we can based on county data.
Also include remote workers who work in the city, but are working for other.
It should. This data gets complicated, but like I work in Eugene and my company is in Portland, and my job I know is shown as being in Eugene. So yes. Did you have a question, Commissioner? Sound hard. Okay, all right. Okay, so then going to the next slide, we talked a lot about economic advantages. Our committee was instrumental in helping us understand how these economic advantages and the economic disadvantages create comparative and competitive advantages for St. Helens as a city that's really, I did this work in Scappoose a couple of years ago, and I said that that's just about in the Portland region, and St. Helens really kind of at the edge of the Portland region in that way, in a lot of different ways. So these are some of the economic advantages. And on the next slide, we've got the economic disadvantages. And so, you know, you might say, well, some of these are real advantages, like distance from I-5, because I don't want to live along I-5. And I can't disagree with you. I can say when you think about it from a business perspective, there are certain types of businesses that wouldn't locate in St. Helens because you're not on I-5, like large regional distribution centers that really need access to that interstate highway. So on the next slide, we also talked about potential growth industries. And the reason to talk about potential growth industries is to think about the types of sites that they may need in a place like St. Helens. So does St. Helens have sites that would be appropriate for paper manufacturing, for instance, or fabricated metal products? These are all industries that are present in St. Helens and generally speaking have a higher than average concentration in St. Helens, the ones that are like manufacturing, that kind of thing. And so we did some work on this, and what we found is that you generally do have sites that are appropriate for this. There may be some opportunities for looking at rezoning sites, that kind of thing, which we looked at more in the policy analysis. So on the next slide. So here is our estimate of, with little tiny numbers on it, of covered employment, which is the image I showed you on the screen that had the bars on it. So about 4,800 employees, covered employees in St. Helens. The estimated total employment was about 7,100. And that's based on the fact that for Columbia County, about 68% of your covered employment, or 68% of your total employment is covered by unemployment insurance. So when we forecast growth for St. Helens, what we started with was the 7,164 employees. If we go to the next slide. We considered a range of employment forecasts. In discussions with staff and with our committee, we landed on the higher range. So this is a little bit aspirational, looking at the region's employment growth, which includes Columbia County, at about 0.89% per year. By 2045, St. Helens will add 1,421 new employees approximately. Is that forecast right? I'll be the first person to tell you that's wrong. Is it very wrong is the question. Because you're not going to land in 2045 with exactly 8,777 employees. Forecasting just doesn't work that way. The way I think about this is we're supposed to have a 20-year supply of land. So this is 20-year forecast of growth. If it's a little bit slow, so it's 15 years of growth, you get there faster. That's okay. You still have time to plan some more. If it's 25 years, that's okay. You're not really hurting yourself by over forecasting. If it was growth that you would achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, that's a problem because you're running out of time to do more planning. Or if it's growth that you would achieve in 40 or 50 years, well, it's a problem if you oversize your water, your wastewater, your transportation system, because that costs a lot to the city. And so for planning purposes, that's why we're forecasting about 1,400 employees of growth. That also means that St. Helens is going to have to do some things to support economic development, which we talk about in the policies, to make sure that that actually happens. And on the next slide, so you've got enough land. There's acres of land, there's 300 acres, can accommodate that additional 1,400 new employees. You've got a fair bit of industrial land that is beyond what you'd need to accommodate those employees, and you're a little scant on commercial land. And so the message I take away from this is be careful of your commercial land. You may want to look for opportunities to rezone a little bit of the industrial land, but you've also got a precious commodity here with your industrial land in some big sites that are publicly owned that have water and wastewater and power to them. Those aren't sites that every city has. And so some of the policy discussion is suggesting preserving some of your prime industrial land. And the city's made quite a lot of investment in your industrial area. So we don't want to waste that. Before I go on, are there questions about any of this? Okay, all right, so then the recommendations. And so what we've got here is in this memorandum, you've got comprehensive plan goals and policies. Those would be adopted into your comprehensive plan and will be replacing what you've got already. You've also got actions to achieve the goals. The actions I would suggest don't go into your comprehensive plan because comprehensive plans are supposed to be a little evergreen. In other words, actions come and go, but comprehensive plan policies should be changed less frequently. And so on the next slide, we've got really little script that shows recommendations for goal A, encouragement of the growth of a healthy, stable, and diversified economic base for commercial and industrial businesses. In other words, you want diversity and you want some growth. I'm not going to read through the selection of the policies. If there's questions about any of the policies, I'm happy to answer them. I think the actions are a little more interesting. So one of the primary actions out of this is look at hiring an economic development specialist. Because there's quite a lot of actions that are in this plan that somebody needs to be responsible for implementing. Of course, that's a cost to the city. And the city will need to decide whether it can do that or not. You're not obligated to do any of these actions. These are actions that discussion with staff, discussion with our advisory committee suggested were good ideas, and they're examples of best practices. Develop a business growth and attraction strategy to attract target industries or other businesses that St. Helens lacks, such as more healthcare services. And so those are a couple of the actions. I will mention also, and I think Jenny probably knows exactly who we had on our committee, but it included people from the port, of course, people from your small business center, other people I can't.
Yeah,
quite
so
remember.
the Grow Greater St. Helens group, we had Paul Vogel from Columbia Economic Team. And then we had, I think, 2 business owners. We had Brad Hendrickson, the marina owner, and a local plumbing contractor, Mindy. And then we also had the Port of Columbia County was represented too. I think that covers everyone. And St. Helens Main Street Alliance. We had Wella as well. She represented our tourism, regional tourism.
Region, yeah, I was gonna say county or regional, whatever she.
Yeah, the RDMO, yeah.
And so a lot of the actions I think came out of discussions. We brought ideas to the table. Some of them were good, some of them weren't so good. Other people had really good actions, and we incorporated all of those into there. There was, of course, opinions and ideas that went into the goals and policies as well. So the next slide, please. So goal B, to ensure that St. Helens has enough land and infrastructure capacity to support a diverse range of employment options. So looking at continuing to work with your state partners and your electrical companies to increase access to electrical power, which is a problem all across the state. It's frankly a problem all across the nation. Continue to support regional and local internet feasibility studies to look at getting more high-speed internet in the area, and conduct a code audit to ensure that zoning regulations are aligned with the city's goals and policies. And of course, code audit means y'all would have some input into that, because that's done through the Planning Commission. So those are some of the key pieces.
You remember that several months of boring code discussions we've had?
Oh man, now you're making me sound bad. I'm promising you several more months if the city chooses to do it. Attract and retain industrial development that diversifies the economic base and supports higher than county average wage job creations and a balanced tax base. So of course you need jobs at all income ranges. Not all jobs will be higher paying, but it is a good idea to strive to getting some of the higher paying jobs as well. They're often harder. So the action that we selected here is conducting a market analysis to identify key opportunities to rezone some land that's not prime industrial to commercial land. So in other words, you don't want to rezone your prime industrial land, whether it's heavy or light industrial, but look at rezoning some of your industrial land to commercial, especially where it's along things like near transportation corridors. That kind of thing, where it makes sense. On the next slide. So foster small business growth and entrepreneurship, partnering with organizations like all the ones that we list there. That is an important part of fostering that business growth and keeping in touch with the businesses and understanding what their concerns or issues are. And then partnering to create a small business incubator or co-working space to support startups and small businesses. I've recently been doing a little bit of work in La Pine, which is down south of Bend. They've actually got 2 little business incubators going in. When I say little, I mean they're like 9-space incubators. It's great. Business incubators are a good way to support startups, and they're really hard to get and to keep going also. They take a lot of work. On the next slide. So foster vibrant commercial zones with a mixture of retail and service options that serve the needs of the residents and enhance the destination appeal. I always like to say, when you've got things that attract people to come here to visit, most of the time residents will love it also. So if you think, I was just in little old Carlton, Oregon recently, that's down near McMinnville, and they have a ton of wine tasting rooms. And I'm sure that people in the surrounding area just, you know, when the tourists are gone, love to go to the wine tasting rooms. Continue to implement the US 30 and Columbia Boulevard / St. Helens Street corridor master plan and riverfront connector plan. So there was quite a lot of discussion in the meetings about the value of what you've got going on here with the waterfront, which you guys are coming in, it looks like, towards the end of that awful construction. My colleagues have done work with you all for I don't know, a decade and longer on that. So do whatever you can do to capitalize on that. Get your different corridors in your different areas connected. I forget the name of your other area that's not the riverfront area.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a different name. It was a name from Tillamook. Very close. So, you know, thinking about the connections between those. So you're driving people to both areas. Not letting the Holton district be forgotten by people like me. And then enhance tourism as an economic driver. So working with a tourism consultant to develop a comprehensive tourism strategy and investigating opportunities to grow sports fishing, kayaking, windsurfing, and other water-based activities. In other words, you've got that nice river right near here. And how can you capitalize on all the work that you've done? So those, in a very quick overview, are the recommendations.
And I wanted to point out for everyone, so we've got our normal staff report that was printed in your packet. It's just 4 pages long, and we linked to the full EOA document because it's over 100 pages. I was going to print, but also in the staff report were the draft text amendments. So you're familiar seeing these with the green and the red. So all of the actual goals and policies that Beth sort of highlighted there are in your packet as being added to our comprehensive plan in green. So I just wanted to point that out. There's a whole selection there.
Was the red original?
Yep. Yeah, that was what was in our comprehensive plan from, I don't know when this. It was older. It was older than 2008. It was older than our EOA. So I don't think our actual EOA even amended our comp plan at the time.
No, it didn't touch on the text.
And then I just also, just like a housekeeping item, maybe you remembered it from the script, but we're also adopting our stormwater, wastewater, and water master plan into our comprehensive plan. This is more of a housekeeping item. It's something we've adopted by resolution previously. I think it's been 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
And Jacob got an email from DLCD saying, hey, it's actually best practice for you to adopt those into your comp plan by ordinance as opposed to just by resolution. So we were taking advantage of this opportunity to amend our comp plan and include other things in it. So that's a housekeeping item, just pointing that out.
Another question is, it's curiosity. Can you define spot zoning for me?
Spot zoning?
Yeah, I think I know, but I just don't want to make sure.
Well, okay, so let's say this circle is industrial. And around the circle is residential. And you have a lot in the middle of the circle. Let's say it's just a 10,000 square foot lot and, 60-acre circle. Why? I want to build a house there. Let's rezone it residential. So that's creating a little island of zoning that is alien to the surrounding area. So you have this spot of varying zoning, which to planners would go, it's kind of weird.
And can create compatibility issues and other problems, real life
I
problems.
just want to make sure what I thought it was. It's there.
All right,
Kind of like it what it sounds.
Yeah.
just to keep with the script. I guess we're asking for any testimony in support of the application. Is there anybody online?
Just David.
Okay. I assume no neutral testimony. Those who are not in favor or against the proposal request testimony in opposition to the application and allow you to rebut. Nobody.
And then just a reminder, this would be a recommendation to city council. You're not the final authority on ordinances.
Right, and so does the commission have any final questions?
Arrive. 54 acres for the commercial land. 29 acres for the industrial land and for the 20 years that you're
And so,
scoping.
so in short, if you go back to the last slide, we started,
The very last.
no, the one that shows the forecast.
This
We
one?
started with those 1,400 new jobs. We separated them out into commercial and industrial and government based on the proportions that you currently have. Then we looked at the number of new employees in each of those and made some assumptions about how many employees would you have per acre. So a density assumption essentially. And for industrial, if I'm remembering it right, it was about 8 employees per acre. And when you think about industrial development, you typically see like really low densities in things like warehouse and distribution, where you've got 2 or 3. You've got a big building with lots of spaces for trucks, and you've got some employees there, but you don't have a ton. Or if you look down in Woodburn at that new Amazon center, which is multi-story, you probably have quite a lot more than 8 employees per acre. You probably have, I don't know, 20 employees per acre. It's pretty high density for industrial. I'm making some assumptions. I don't actually know that for sure. So you've got a range that you could land in. For commercial, we assumed about 20 to 25 employees per acre, because commercial, you tend to have people, sitting at desks. They've got a smaller workspace per employee. And so we took those number of new employees. We looked at an estimate of employee density based on what you see in cities typical to St. Helens. And then we looked at how much land you have in St. Helens in rights of way. Because you come out with an estimate of net acres and you want to convert that into gross acres that includes land for rights of way. And so we inflated that up to include land for rights of way, and that's how we came to those numbers.
Sounds quite extensive.
It's a lot of averaging.
It is. It's a set of reasonable assumptions. It's part of the reason whenever you look at forecasting anything, the longer the period, the smaller the area, the more assumptions you have, the more off your forecast is going to be. And so we're trying to keep it as simple as
We're going to give you a quiz on it tomorrow.
totally.
The only question I had was on page 205, it's section 3 under policies. Under C, where it says coordinate economic development efforts with other jurisdictions and agencies such as, and it lists the agencies. Would there be a reason to say such as, but not limited to, in case those agencies change?
Is it a policy or an action? I mean, we could say such as, but not limited to. You're not going to be, this isn't legally binding in that way. So if you find that, you need to coordinate with Vernonia and Vernonia is not listed in there, I'm just trying to pick someplace nearby-ish, but odd.
In the language such as implies
But there may be others.
that it can be others from
Others,
from
okay.
a legal standpoint.
That's the only thing I know. Yes.
Have any questions?
I'll say this was one of the items on our previous strategic plan, 22 to 24. Something we said we were gonna do and it's done. Here we are.
Just to clarify, I'm just a little uncomfortable with this, where we're adding those housekeeping items. But you're wanting us to make a recommendation to to city council, and we haven't, this group hasn't necessarily moved into those items at all.
Yeah, I don't know if you think of, I would just say we've been utilizing them for 3 years now at this point, and they're adopted by resolution already. So it's really just strengthening that tool that we've been utilizing for 3 years.
Yeah, so it's like Jenny mentioned, we're just trying to implement that best practice. And so when we were like, oh, okay, we're doing this, let's go ahead and include those in there, try to be efficient.
And that's also just a recommendation to city council.
Yeah, and the plans did go before the planning commission. I just know it wasn't the same body that is before us now, but there were public hearings associated, or not, I don't know if they're public hearings, but the consultants came and presented on each master plan. So I don't know if that helps, but
It's whoever was on the commission a few years ago, and it's changed a lot recently, so.
Yeah. Does anybody have any conversation around that?
Makes sense to me. Make our comprehensive plan more comprehensive.
So hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and recommendation to city council.
So is this one of those weird ones where we make a motion or we just?
Make a motion.
Make a motion.
recommend approval.
I move that we recommend approval to the city council of the
Comprehensive plan.
comprehensive plan.
I will second that motion.
Scared me, David.
I'm coming out of nowhere.
Commissioner Kingsbury.
I'm an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
David?
Aye.
So the city council public hearing, if anyone's watching, is April 16th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you for your work on this. I want to say it was a great committee.
You're the same thing all over again.
Unless Mike Wilkerson shows up, I won't be.
I was gonna say, he's the skunk. Indeed.
Thank you. Safe driving.
Planning, we've already discussed the joint meeting, so planning director decisions. Anybody have any questions on what was previously emailed you?
Nothing too exciting, but there is another little market proposed down here.
Say that again?
Another little market that's proposed down here. Over there on St. Street.
Where we talked about the window.
Yes, that's right. Of course, yeah.
That's great. It sounds like our storefronts proactive item would be good for the EOA. Businesses. So. All right, and planning department activity report for February.
Yeah, I didn't review it to remind myself what was in there. But if you have any questions on it.
And then proactive items remain the same, but do we want to discuss what I proposed, casually proposed on making a work session before we start the hearings, or how do we move forward on architectural standards and vacant storefronts in the Plaza Square proactive items?
And so for tomorrow's joint meeting, there were no special items, and so these items are on there. I put a little bit together to kind of help with standards, and I think it's important to take baby steps, because so far it's just been, what's the scope? Historic district, the city. And so there really hasn't been any decision making. And so if certain decisions can be made incrementally, I think that's a way to make progress on the architectural standards. And so I'll talk about a little bit of it tomorrow on that.
That's at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then with the council there, because the council's completely different, well, not completely different, but new mayor and stuff from when we had this discussion before.
Is anyone planning on not being there tomorrow?
I'm gonna be there.
I'll be there.
I'm going to try to. It's going to depend on what my docket's like tomorrow and how early I can get out of things at work.
Okay, so you're a maybe, David?
I am a maybe.
Okay.
And it's not something to feel guilty about. 4 o'clock's at the hearing time, so.
Nobody had opposition at 4 o'clock before, so it's
No.
nice that we have a good turnout, so. Right. For your information items.
Sorry, with the planning director's decisions.
Mhm.
I think there still could be comment on the architectural standards with the covering of the windows. I think it's commented on it till March 13th. And what I was thinking, what I read was with the windows, it says to leave them intact. I think maybe a little more robust language would be appropriate. Just to, kind of preserve what is there. I mean, it's kind of vague. That's what I was suggesting.
Oh. It might be a little late to amend the decision just to add some words.
Okay. Well, I thought we were able to until the 13th.
So the notice that you get is implying that that's like an appeal deadline or a deadline for an amended decision based on testimony, usually from a neighbor, an applicant, or a staff agency. Like if engineering commented and said, hey, this isn't gonna work. And we needed to amend the decision.
I just thought it was for comments too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, and the applicant was pretty clear they wanted the windows to remain, so they're gonna do everything they can.
It is something that, it's a platform to discuss. But it's changing it now would be kind of weird.
But maybe moving forward, we can keep that in mind.
Next time someone wants to cover windows.
Right, you good with that, Scott? So for your information items,
Can't think of anything.
We're gonna discuss how to move forward with the meetings laws. And I think we're supposed to consider that this past month. Do you have any ideas on that?
my question to staff is. Can one commissioner meet with other volunteers and put out the volunteers for each applicable line item? It wouldn't be any kind of forum or subcommittee, you're just getting public testimony. I think it's these things, especially the architectural standards, and making sure the public can have a lot to say.
Yeah,
Nice if we could either do some kind of format where the public gets to speak on these.
And it's
tomorrow, I guess.
And it's something that you could, as you talk about it, recommend a public forum. And maybe it's a forum before the planning commission, maybe it's a forum with the council and the commission to try to get that feedback. But I think like the architectural standards, it's, this is what I was going to talk about tomorrow, but what's important? And maybe some of that feedback would help with that discussion. I think there's gonna be a point where it makes a lot of sense to get citizen response, community involvement, because, I mean, so we talked about statewide planning goal 9, economic development. Well, what's statewide planning goal number 1?
Scott.
Whiz.
It's
It's the one before two.
it's citizen involvement. And so getting that input, I think, is important, and we would be remiss not to. It's just, when is that important? But, and that's where tomorrow about architectural standards. That's really the first question is, what's important to you? And then you can start focusing on, okay, how do we advance what's important? Because it's just right now, the discussions we've had, it's just been this huge item, and you're just trying to drink water from a fire hose, and it's just ineffective. So if we can reduce that stream down to a trickle where it's drinkable, and then over time, you start to build this record of, okay, this is what it's important, and then you're progressing. And so I'm going to kind of talk about baby steps tomorrow, at least on the architectural standards, which I hope helps the commission going forward take the little baby bites, and so we're not just discussing it, because we've been talking about it for years.
Yeah. Sounds like it, yeah.
And really have made zero progress, and so that's why I put a few things together to talk about tomorrow.
Well, I mean, we were supposed to be discussing it, and then, I mean, I think one way forward is do it electronically. That's, would be all available through freedom of information, that type of stuff. I mean, it's public domain then, so we could, would think be able to converse that way. Because, again, even now, whatever we email each other for from staff is public domain type of stuff.
Can you clarify that for me? Are you suggesting Zoom meetings? Are you suggesting emails to each other? Are you?
Emails, you could just do an email, I would think.
There was the more recent meeting we had on the Oregon Ethics Commission, whatever they're called. I can't remember that.
Scott was there.
Yeah. My point is, before that, several years before that, there was a planning commission somewhere, I can't remember, or maybe it was the council, I can't remember, but there was emails outside of meetings, and that was determined to be a meeting because of the quorum of the commissioners involved in that email chain. Now, the more recent one was what kind of put the kibosh on the non-quorum subcommittee, because it's still official government business happening behind the scenes, not being visible to the public. So emails would constitute that kind of communication, unfortunately.
Have another ethics thing going.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Thank you for bringing that up. Kathy sent an email that there's a webinar on March 20th at 2:00. Which is, the topic is Oregon Public Meetings Law. She said she sent it out to all the commissioners and supporting staff. So
I signed up for it.
Okay, great. And if you haven't been to the first one, this is like really, really important information. So if you can make it, attend, but there might be a Q&A maybe. And so, you go with some questions and you might be able to quiz them. It's being held by a law firm that works with local jurisdictions addressing this stuff. And maybe if we overload them with a bunch of questions, they'll answer them later or something like that. But, we're learning with you on this stuff. So.
Well, there's a different, they're applying it more rigorously now.
Yes, right. The rules were always in place, but now they're actually enforcing them. Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes things more challenging.
Yep. All right, to the co-counselors have anything to add?
Realty and Twinville.
It's been an interesting week, in the city. I did have a meeting with some developers. And, they're big folks, financially and develop a lot of properties. Obviously, we just introduced them to what we had. And, we'll see what comes of that. They are interested in probably taking on the waterfront and all of it. And it would be a partnership for sale, and they probably hold some of it for themselves. So they're like any developer. They're come in, look at the financial part of it. Then they've got the design and construction team that comes in, feasibility of what's right for the time now and housing and commercial. So, yeah, it was just the first talk, but they seemed interested, and so hopefully they come back and talk some more, but they'll think they'd be great to work with. They've track record really good.
Then they would still have to come in with an RFP, or what would be the process?
Oh, we're not even
close to that.
It was just a meet and greet and talk to the principals and the different divisions. So they're going back and taking a hard look. And so I think that's something that was brought in my attention, and so I got to meet with the mayor and them and a couple other people. PUD was there, so we got some people to answer questions for them, but they love the city and they didn't really know much about it. Like, you hear that so often. It's like, there's a river.
Did the city initiate contact or were they recruited?
No, they were pretty much by a acquaintance that's been dealing with them on some other properties that knows St. Helens. Take a look at this one. And so truly at first blush, it looks good, but it's years and years away before anything would happen. Their developments are driven by economics, which it should be, because then they're usually successful. So they've done some very big projects, and I would have no problem. We're going to talk further if we can, unless they just say, well, we're not interested. But I think as far as the planning commission got down the road with these people, I know they're going to come back and go, well, we've got all these buildings we want to build, but we have no parking. And so they might suggest an area like you've already suggested, I think. But I think that's going to be one of the big issues. Other places they've built, they just go down. I told them, I said, go down in this town. The most. So anyway, it was a good first meeting, and we'll see. What you did.
Brought you into this whole thing and to bring it to them.
Thanks a lot.
So I'm managing. This is the guy on the ground. No, I don't have it. Happy to be here.
Right. We're done then. Meeting adjourned.
Have a good day, y'all.